If you have done your best, you're done.
Okay.
That's it. If you've done your best, you're done.
Okay.
So, and you might not feel relief right away, but again, I can't state it any simpler than that. If you've done your best, you're done. And if you don't have peace now, as you continue to work through the steps, you will find that peace. You will find it. Right? It says at the end of the fifth step that we know God better. We still don't know Him, but we know Him better, right? Looking again at those defects, we are still circled the word defects, right, and right fourth column. That's the fourth column on all that paperwork. Looking again at those defects we are still unwilling to give up, we ought to erase the hard and fast lines that we have drawn. Perhaps we shall be obliged in some cases still to say, this I cannot give up yet, but we should not say to ourselves, underline and write warning after it, this I will never give up. We're going to write warning next to that. Let's dispose of what appears to be a hazardous open end we have left. Underline the next sentence. It is suggested that we ought to become entirely willing to aim toward perfection. You know, I had this one fella that was in a small group, and he thought that if he worked these steps and discovered some humility, that he was not going to be successful at work. He was a salesman much like myself. And he said, these are the characteristics that make me a good salesman. And, I used to think that too. I used to think, hey man, if I give up my dishonesty, how am I going to make these big sales, right? If I give up my greed, how am I going to strive and push myself? Well, when we take these things to extreme, we're hurting others and we're hurting ourselves. And what's good about this is if we can get rid of some of these character defects, and I used to think I wouldn't be a real person if I got rid of them. But what happens is when you start to get rid of these character defects, God gives you the opposite, and the opposite starts to flow in. And I got to tell you, getting rid of many of these character defects, my sales are better. They're better, right? They're better. I'm not scooping other people, right? I'm being more kind and considerate. I'm helping people out. Guess what? When I'm not there, guess what they do for me? They help me out too. So, we give up these character defects. We're going to probably be more successful at work. We're going to be more successful in our home life, and we're going to be better people and able to help others in these rooms of AA. It is suggested that we ought to become entirely willing to aim toward perfection. We're never going to get there, ever, but we can be content with patient improvement. We note that some delay, however, might be pardoned. Underline the next two sentences. That word in the mind of a rationalizing alcoholic could certainly be given a long-term meaning. Okay, we don't want to do that. He could say, how very easy, sure, I'll head toward perfection, but I'm certainly not going to hurry any. Maybe I can postpone dealing with some of my problems indefinitely. Okay, we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. Of course, this won't do. Such a bluffing of oneself will have to go the way of many another pleasant rationalization. At the very least, we shall have to come to grips with some of our worst character defects and take action, circle action, toward their removal as quickly as we can. The moment we say no, never, we're going to highlight this to the end too. The moment we say no, never, our minds close against the grace of God. Delay is dangerous and rebellion may be fatal. Okay, so that's a huge warning right there. We're going to rebel against these things. It's telling us right there that we might drink again, and we drink, many of us are going to die. This is the exact point at which we abandon limited objectives and move towards God's will for us. So at the bottom, we're going to write step 6 points. We got A, B, and C. Step 6 points. A, setting us up to help others. B, granted release from alcohol and drugs if it applies, and gambling if it applies, and sex if it applies, right? Whatever your gig is. Granted release from alcohol. And C, now turn towards working with others. So A and C are a little different. Step 6 points. A, setting us up to help others. B, granted release from alcohol, drugs, gambling. C, now turn towards working with others. And that's what I meant about self-abandonment, right? You know, if we get to think of ourselves less, that's a big relief for me when I'm not thinking about John all the time. That's a wonderful relief. And when I work with other people, I think Clancy said it. He said, when you're thinking about that poor son of a bitch, and he's talking about our new sponsee, you're not thinking about this poor son of a bitch, and I'm pointing at myself, right? So we get by by thinking of others, we get to self-forget. So setting us up to help others, granted release from alcohol, now turn towards working with others. All right, we're going to keep plowing here. We're on page 70. Top of the page, we're going to write humbly mentioned 35 times, right? So I guess that's going to tell us that humility is the principle of step 7. Humbly's mentioned 35 times in this chapter. Humbly mentioned 35 times. Humility is principle. And then you can write definition of humility, page 58. So humbly mentioned 35 times. Humility is principle. One definition, I should say, but definition of humility, page 58. And when everybody's done writing, we're going to shoot over to page 58 in the 12 by 12. So humbly mentioned 35 times. Humility is principle. Definition of humility, page 58. So let's go to page 58. We're going to go to the first full paragraph about a quarter of the way down where it says another great dividend. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3. We're going to go down 3 lines. And then we're going to underline where it says to those. And we're going to underline the next 4 lines. To those who have made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. So next to that, let's write humility. To those who have made progress in AA, it amounts to a clear recognition of what and who we really are, followed by a sincere attempt to become what we could be. I said earlier, some of us come in, we think we're the worst ever. Some of us think we're the best either. In either case, that's not correct. What we're going to try to do is, hey, what are we, right? And what can we become? What can we become with God's help? So, good definition of humility there. Humbly, underline humbly, asked him to remove our shortcomings. Underline shortcomings, and again, write 4th column. That's that darn 4th column, right? Selfish, dishonest, self-seeking. I mean, we got that. We've got that on all our sheets. And frightened, inconsiderate. From those character defects stem all others, right? So that's the 4th column, our shortcomings. Since this step so specifically concerns itself with humility, underline humility, we should pause here to consider what humility, underline humility again, is, and what the practice of it can mean to us. We're going to have to highlight the whole next paragraph here. Indeed, the attainment of greater humility. Okay, so right above greater humility, write ego deflation. Ego deflation. Right? I had some strange ideas about how great I was. I like it. Gosh, what did that guy say? He said, you're an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. Right? And that was me. Indeed, the attainment of greater humility, which is ego deflation, is the foundation principle of each of AA's 12 steps. Right? Each of the steps. For without some degree of humility, no alcoholic can stay sober at all. That's why we're highlighting this whole paragraph. Nearly all AAs have found, too, that unless they develop much more of this precious quality than may be required just for sobriety, they still haven't much chance of becoming truly happy. Without it, they cannot live to much useful purpose or, in adversity, be able to summon the faith that can meet any emergency. Right? So this humility, it's going to help us become useful to other people, right? And it's going to help us when we run into adversity. It's going to help us a lot, right? When we have emergencies. Humility, underline that word humility again. As a word and as an ideal has a very bad time of it in our world. Not only is the idea misunderstood, the word itself is often intensely disliked. Many people haven't even a nodding acquaintance with humility as a way of life. Much of the everyday talk we hear and a great deal of what we read highlights man's pride in his own achievements. Next to that paragraph, let's just write reread often, and that's actually this whole page, reread often. You know, if somebody harmed me in some way, right, I had no humility. I had to let that person know in no uncertain terms that I knew what the hell they did, and they did it to the wrong guy, and they're going to get theirs, right? That's how humble I was, right? And I had to let them know that I knew when they were going to get their comeuppance, because I was going to get even with that son of a bitch, right? That's how I used to live my life. It's horrible. With great intelligence, men of science have been forcing nature to disclose her secrets. The immense resources now being harnessed promise such a quantity of material blessings that many have come to believe that a man-made millennium lies just ahead. Poverty will disappear, and there will be such abundance that everybody can have all the security and personal satisfaction he desires. Okay, highlight to the end of the paragraph. The theory seems to be that once everybody's primary instincts are satisfied, there won't be much left to quarrel about. The world will then turn happy and be free to concentrate on culture and character. Solely by their own intelligence and labor, men will have shaped their own destiny. Okay, so that's telling us that that's where they get these ideas about a perfect socialist or communist society, right? Everybody's got exactly what they need. The state provides everything, right? If that's the case, then nobody's going to have to fight or quarrel about anything. But you know what, man? That doesn't work. We see that it doesn't work, right? Because our instincts, after destiny, we can write, instincts are still out of control. Right? So we human beings, and particularly alcoholics, are going to want more. We're going to want more stuff than everybody else gets. We're going to want more sex. We're going to want a bigger house. We're going to want all of these things, right? You know, I remember, man, I 6 months sober, not working these steps, I was buying my first house. And, I feel, I'm going to buy this house. That's going to fill that giant hole in my chest, right? Yeah, buy the house, and I get there, all of a sudden I turn around, I look at my neighbor's house, and it's twice the size of mine. I'm like, damn it, I want that house, right? Until I worked these steps and got a little bit of humility, and was able to forget about John a little bit, I had no peace at all. At the top of the page, let's write, humiliation is a lesson. Humiliation is a lesson. Humility is a gift. You know, we're gonna be able to have a lot more peace and serenity if we got a little bit of humility. Humiliation is a lesson. Humility is a gift. We tend to confuse these two words. Humility is not humiliation. It is not the same thing. Right? Remember, we discovered when we're doing our fourth step that we weren't angry at the people. We weren't even angry at what the people did. We were angry at how we reacted based upon a threat to one of our basic instincts. Right? If they threatened how other people saw me, if they threatened my ability to have sex with my girlfriend, if they threatened my money, right? That's what got me pissed off, right? Certainly no alcoholic and surely no member of AA wants to deprecate material achievement, right? We're not saying that. Underline the next 3 lines. Nor do we enter into debate with the many who still so passionately cling to the belief that to satisfy our basic natural desires is the main object of life. Highlight that, and next to it write the lie in quotation marks, right? I got to tell you guys, man, I'm running around in my life, I got this giant hole in my chest, and I'm shoving stuff in there like that girlfriend, this girlfriend, being top salesman here, getting this new job there, getting that nice car over there. I am shoving all that crap into my giant hole, and it did nothing. But we are sure that no class of people in the world ever made a worse mess of trying to live by this formula than alcoholics. Okay, highlight to the end of the paragraph. For thousands of years, we have been demanding more than our share of security, prestige, and romance. Next to that, write third column again. That's that third column. When people threaten that, we get pissed. When we seemed to be succeeding, we drank to dream still greater dreams. When we were frustrated, even in part, we drank for oblivion. Never was there enough of what we thought we wanted. After of what we thought we wanted, let's write addicted to more. Addicted to more. In all these strivings, we're going to highlight the next two paragraphs, or just the next paragraph. In all these strivings, so many of them well-intentioned, our crippling handicap has been our lack of humility. We had lacked the perspective to see that character building and spiritual values had to come first, and that material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. I used to, every time I sobered up, every time, I went through 9 treatments when stuff got really bad, right? I would escape into treatment and get away from the world that was collapsing about me. I would get out of treatment, and I would say, oh my God, I don't have a job and I don't have any money. I'm a worthless human being. So I would not work these steps. I would immediately go out. I would find a new job. I would work and I would work and I would strive and I would strive. I'd get money back in my pocket. I'd get a nice place to live. I'd get a nice vehicle, because I felt if I didn't have those things, I was not worth anything as a human, right? That gave me, I always relapsed. I always relapsed because I never worked these darn steps. And that's why it's so important when people come into these rooms, right? They come in and they're all beat up, and their self-will is at an all-time low. That's why it's important to get these people, grab onto them, and run them through the steps as quickly as we can, right? Because, I used to be so beat up that just the fact that I was beat to hell, I could get 3 or 4 months sober. And, as time would pass, after the first month, I would say, my God, I'm lucky to have this job. I'm starting to get some money back. Second month, oh my gosh, I'm lucky. I got this nice place to live now. Thank you, God. Oh boy, I'm so grateful to have this. By the time I'd get to the third month, I'd say, they're screwing me. I'd get my self-will back, and I'd say they're not paying me enough. They're not treating me right. My car isn't nice enough, and this place to live sucks, right? And then when we start thinking like that, what do? We reach for the bottle, right? We reach for the bottle. So we had, my father, I remember my father, he had, and I never understood it, but he had what was called a classical education, where they taught the classics, and they taught character building. They taught that we help others before ourselves. And my mother and father were both like that. And many of my brothers and sisters were like that too. And I did not learn from them. I did not learn anything from them. And they say that we learn from our mistakes. If I had learned from my mistakes, I would have sobered up long ago. If we alcoholics, we don't learn from our mistakes. We do the same damn thing over and over and over, and we hope that we're going to get different results, right? So this is such a huge thing, to get a little bit of humility, man. Just a little bit. So spiritual values had to come first, and that material satisfactions were not the purpose of living. So that big house is not the purpose of life, man. I've discovered, and what gives my life meaning today is helping other people. That's what gives my life meaning now. And that's why I can look myself in the mirror and I can feel good about myself, right? Because that's more important than this other crap. Quite characteristically, we had gone all out in confusing the ends with the means. Instead of regarding the satisfaction of our material desires as the means by which we could live and function as human beings, we had taken these satisfactions to be the final end and aim in life. If only I have enough money. If only I have the best looking girlfriend. If only I got that nicest car. If only I can take these luxury vacations, I'm going to be okay, right? So at the bottom of the page, let's write, who are you helping? Question mark. Are you praying / meditating? Question mark. Are you developing new personalities? Question mark. Who are you helping? Question mark. Are you praying, meditating? Question mark. Are you developing new personalities? Question mark. Who are you helping? Are you praying and meditating? Are you developing new personality? true, most of us thought good character was desirable, but obviously good character was something one needed to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. Say, top of the page, and I'm going to start going fast, guys, because we still got a lot to do. We might go 5 minutes over. Top of the page, let's write developing spiritually or going back to defects. That's our choice. Developing spiritually or going back to defects. And I got to tell you guys, I got a short memory, man. That's why I have got to align myself with people that are trying to grow spiritually. That's why I get to go to these meetings for the rest of my life, and I get to help other people for the rest of my lives, and that's going to help me. Developing spiritually or going back to defects. I don't want to go back. I got a glimpse of the way I used to be this past 5 days when I went off the deep end. I don't want to go back there, man. Developing spiritually or going back to defects. But obviously good character was something one needed to get on with the business of being self-satisfied. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. With a proper display of honesty and morality, we'd stand a better chance of getting what we really wanted. But whenever we had to choose between character above character, right, challenge, and comfort above comfort, right, easier, softer, the character building was lost in the dust of our chase after what we thought was happiness. So also off to the left, right, warning. We got another warning here. Seldom did we look at character building as something desirable in itself, something we would like to strive for whether our instinctual needs were met or not. We never thought of making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God the daily basis of living. So we've highlighted that whole thing, and we're going to put a big star next to that last sentence. And after the daily basis of living, we're going to write must. That's a must. That's a must. You know, again, I mean, that's what a classical education is about. It's about the building of character. It's about doing the next right thing. The next right thing. This lack of anchorage to any permanent values, this blindness to the true purpose of our lives, produced another bad result. Highlight the next 4 lines. For just so long as we were convinced that we could live exclusively by our own individual strength and intelligence, for just that long was a working faith in a higher power impossible. Okay, so highlight next to that, we're going to write, as I become less, I get more in my life. As I become less, I get more in my life. I can't be out there defending myself against everybody and everything and defending all these basic instincts and be surrendered to a higher power at the same time. I cannot be defended and surrendered, man. I got to surrender. I got to surrender. I got to get some humility. I've got to accept things. I've got to let some things go. As I become less, I get more in my life. This was true even when we believed that God existed. We could actually have earnest religious beliefs which remained barren because we were still trying to play God ourselves. Okay, so right in there, write third step. We need the third step there. Just write it. Remember, the third step, God is the director. And then we're going to highlight to the end of the paragraph. As long as we place self-reliance first, a genuine reliance upon a higher power was out of the question. That basic ingredient of all humility, a desire to seek and do God's will, was missing. So next to desire to seek and do God's will, we're going to write action. Right? We're going to write action. And we're going to write the word humility. What another wonderful definition of humility. Right? A desire to seek and do God's will. Right? My whole life, I sought and did John's will. You know, John needs more money. John needs a better girlfriend. John needs this. John needs that. Right? This is a wonderful definition of humility. Desire to seek and do God's will was missing. Again, let's highlight the next 3 lines. For us, the process of gaining a new perspective was unbelievably painful. It was only by repeated humiliations that we were forced to learn something about humility. Right? I mean, I ended up in treatment over and over and over and over. Lost job after job, lost friend after friend. It was only at the end of a long road marked by successive defeats and humiliations, underlined to the next 3 lines, and the final crushing of our self-sufficiency, that we began to feel humility as something more than a condition of groveling despair. So next to that, what we just underlined, next to it off to the left, write pray for willingness. Pray for willingness. And then write page 76. And then we're going to write something at the bottom. Humility, not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less. Humility, not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less. There's wonderful freedom in thinking of others first, thinking of yourself less, right? Not always having to worry about you. Much, much more peace of mind that way. Not thinking less of me, but thinking of me less. Top of page 73, let's write, let God fix you. Let God fix you. Remember, self cannot overcome self. We tried willpower to quit drinking, and we're going to try our willpower on our character defects, right? Now, I'm not saying that we don't have to work with God's help. We do, but we need God's help. So let's let God fix you. Every newcomer in Alcoholics Anonymous is told and soon realizes for himself, underline the next two lines, that his humble admission of powerlessness over alcohol is his first step toward liberation from its paralyzing grip, right? That's step one. And if we cannot get step one, we can't do anything else, man. So it is that we first see humility as a necessity. We need it in step one. But this is the barest beginning. Highlight to the end of the paragraph. To get completely away from our aversion to the idea of being humble, to gain a vision of humility as the avenue to true freedom of the human spirit, to be willing to work for humility as something to be desired for itself, takes most of us a long, long time. A whole lifetime geared towards self-centeredness cannot be set in reverse all at once. Rebellion dogs our every step. These last 5 days, I took several steps backwards, right? And that's why this session is coming just at the right time, man. Just at the right time. I get to start over. I get to improve. I get to go make amends if I've done wrongs. When we have finally admitted without reservation, underline without reservation, that we were powerless over alcohol, we are apt to breathe a great sigh of relief saying, well, thank God that's over. I'll never have to go through that again. Then we learn, often to our consternation, that this is only the first milestone on the new road we are walking. Still goaded by sheer necessity, we reluctantly come to grips, underline 5 words, with those serious character flaws, and then write fourth column again, that made problem drinkers of us in the first place. Okay, then underline the next 4 lines. Flaws which must be dealt with to prevent a retreat into alcoholism once again. We will want to be rid of some of these defects, but in some instances this will appear to be an impossible job from which we recoil. Okay, so you can stop highlighting there. So they're telling us that our problem wasn't alcohol. Remember where in the big book, man, it says that was our drinking was but a symptom, right? It's a symptom of these doggone character defects. And if we don't deal with them with God's help, guess what? We're going to start drinking again, and when we drink, we're probably going to die. And we cling with a passionate persistence to others which are just as disturbing to our equilibrium because we still enjoy them too much. How can we possibly summon the resolution and the willingness to get rid of such overwhelming compulsions and desires? Bottom of the page, I wrote, change comes hard to John. Put your name in there because it really does. So change comes hard to, and put your name in there. Change came real hard to me, and remember, this is a lifetime job. Like I say, the last 3 years of my life have been the story of steps 6 and 7. But again, we are driven on by the inescapable conclusion which we draw from AA experience that we surely must, try with a will or else fall by the wayside. At this stage of our progress, we are under heavy pressure and coercion to do the right thing. We are obliged to choose between the pains of trying and the certain penalties of failing to do so. These initial steps along the road are taken grudgingly, yet we do take them. We may still have no very high opinion of humility as a desirable personal virtue, but we do recognize it as a necessary aid to our survival. Okay, but when we have taken a square look at some of these defects, put a 4 next to that, have discussed them with another, put a 5 above that, and have become willing to have them removed, put a 6 above that, our thinking about humility commences to have a wider meaning. By this time, in all probability, we have gained some measure of release from our more, underline, devastating handicaps. And then underline this next sentence. We enjoy moments in which there is something like real peace of mind. That's wonderful. We get these little snatches here and again. To those of us who have hitherto known only excitement, depression, or anxiety, in other words, to all of us, underline, this newfound peace is a priceless gift. And then underline to the end of the paragraph too. Something new indeed has been added. Where humility had formerly stood for a forced feeding on humble pie, it now begins to mean the nourishing ingredient which can give us serenity. Remember that story I told you about the people in the insane asylum? The doctor asked all of these people, they said, would you rather be right or would you rather be free? And something like 90% of them said, I would rather be right. They're all locked up, right? When we got to be right all the time, we're not going to be free. We're not going to have that serenity. This improved perception of humility starts another revolutionary change in our outlook. Our eyes begin to open to the immense values which have come straight out of painful ego puncturing. Underline this next sentence. Until now, our lives have been largely devoted to running from pain and problems. Just underline that little line. We fled from them as from a plague. We never wanted to deal with the fact of suffering. Underline to the end of the page. Escape via the bottle was always our solution. Character building through suffering might be all right for saints, but it certainly didn't appeal to us. So we're going to write something at the bottom of the page. Now this is true in these meetings and in this fellowship, but it's also true at home and it's also true at work. Live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. Live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. Guess what I was doing for the last 5 days? Right? Live in the solution. Don't bitch about the problem. So I'm taking tomorrow off, and I'm going back to work on Thursday with just a great attitude that we are going to figure out. We're going to figure, as we got a lot of problems, man. I'm going to help figure it out, and I'm going to add to the solution. I'm not going to bitch about what's going on. There was a woman, this speaker that I heard. She was just wonderful. She said, right here it says. Devoted to running from pain and problems. She said, even when we're sober, we do that. She said, when I've got a bad emotional problem going on, she said, you know what I do? I watch TV, I read, I shop, or I go to a meeting, right? I'm not saying don't go to meetings. She said, what I have learned to do is I have learned to sit and I have learned to feel the pain. Other people have been feeling the pain their whole lives. We've been running. Sometimes it's good for us just to sit down and not distract ourselves, but to feel the doggone pain that we're going through and to learn from it, right? That's something I never did before. Right? Character building through suffering might be all right for saints, but it doesn't appeal to me. At the top of the page, 75, let's write, it's not odd, it's God. It's not. I thought there were a heck of a lot of coincidences going on when I first sobered up, right? It's not odd, it's God. Then in AA, we looked and listened. Everywhere we saw failure and misery transformed by humility into priceless assets. We heard story after story of how humility had brought strength out of weakness. In every case, underline, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. Just underline that little line and next to it write gift of desperation. Gift of desperation. Man, I still remember that last week before I went into detox. Oh my God. Pain had been the price of admission into a new life. But this admission price had purchased more than we expected. It brought a measure of humility, which we soon discovered to be a healer of pain. So our humility is going to help heal us. We began to fear pain less and desire humility more than ever. Let's highlight the next two lines. During this process of learning more about humility, the most profound result of all was the change in our attitude toward God. Just highlight that, and next to it write spiritual awakening. That's what they're talking about, spiritual awakening. Just those words, but it can also be called a spiritual experience, a personality transformation, or a psychic change. I don't care what you call it. And this was true whether we had been believers or unbelievers. Underline the next 5 lines. We began to get over the idea that the higher power was a sort of Bush League pinch hitter to be called upon only in emergency. The notion that we would still live our own lives, God helping a little now and then, began to evaporate. Next to that, write foxhole prayer, foxhole prayers. God, get me out of this one, and I promise I'll never do it again. God, I just need a little bit of help here. I surrender to you in step 3, God, but don't mess with my sex life or my money and leave that to me. Many of us who thought ourselves religious awoke to the limitations of this attitude. Refusing to place God first, we had deprived ourselves of his help. But now the words, underline, of myself I am nothing, the Father doeth the works, that's that little thing there, began to carry bright promise and meaning. We saw we needn't always be bludgeoned and beaten into humility. Okay, underline the next 5 lines. It could come quite as much from our voluntary reaching for it as it could from unremitting suffering. A great turning point in our lives came when we sought for humility as something we really wanted rather than as something we must have. Just that little bit there. And that's tough, man. I mean, a lot of us take a lifetime to get there. But again, we're going to be happy if we can just patiently improve. It marked the time when we could commence to see the full implication of step 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. We're going to write something at the bottom. God reveals more to me the more I seek him. You know, if I don't hit my knees in the morning and at night, asking what, hey man, what is your will? What do you think I should be doing? I'm not going to get any answers, and I also have to listen when I do that too. This book gives us all kinds of wonderful prayers. I love that fear prayer we had in step 4. God, please remove my fear and show me what you would have me be. Right? That's so wonderful. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. As we approach the actual taking of step 7, it might be well if we A's inquire once more just what our deeper objectives are. Okay, so we're going to put a 1 in front of each. Each of us would like to live at peace with himself and his fellows, and highlight that. So there's 2 objectives you can write. That's one of them. Each of us would like to live at peace with himself and his fellows, and then put a 2 in front of we. We would like to be assured that the grace of God can do for us what we cannot do for ourselves. So those, you can write 2 objectives, right? Those are 2 objectives of step 7. We have seen that character defects based upon short-sighted or unworthy desires are the obstacles that block our path toward these objectives. We now clearly see that we have been making unreasonable demands upon ourselves, upon others, and upon God. So, somebody once told me that expectations are unborn resentments, right? We're making demands upon ourselves, also upon everybody else in our life. Do what I want you to do, damn it. And upon God, right? Foxhole prayers here. So we're gonna, let's see here. We're gonna highlight the next paragraph. Well, just the whole damn rest of the book here. This page. This is an important one, though, right here. The first paragraph. The chief activator of our defects. We covered that already, but here it is again. The chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. Primarily fear, put a 1 in front of we. That we would lose something we already possessed, right? That's the first thing. Or would, put a 2 in front of fail. Would fail to get something we demanded or something we thought we deserved, right? So those, and we added a third one that we wrote down when we were doing the 4th step. And that third one was, I've done something to another human being and I'm afraid they're going to catch me at it, and when they catch me, I'm going to lose something. You don't got to write that because I think we wrote it earlier. But so I added a third one. We're going to lose something we already have. Or would fail to get something we demanded. I mean, I've seen people do crazy things so they don't lose their house, right? They're going to lie, cheat, steal. They're going to do anything. right? We got this big thing, and we need to do things so we don't lose it. So what? So what? We'll be fine, man. We'll be fine if we lose that house. We'll be okay if we don't get that promotion. We don't got to lie, cheat, and steal to get it, right? So living upon a basis, underline, of unsatisfied demands, just underline that one too, even though we highlighted it. We were in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. Therefore, no peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. That's why when we get up in the morning, we hit our knees. Let's think about 4 or 5 things we're grateful for. Let's say, God, thank you so much for the people in my life. Thank you for my sobriety. Thank you that I got this roof over my head. Thank you for the challenges that you're going to give me today. We can find many things to be grateful about. The difference between a demand and a simple request is plain to everyone, to anyone. So if we're happy with what we've got and we're grateful, we will not be in a continual state of disturbance and frustration. That's how I live my life, and I sure as hell don't want to go back to that. That's no fun. That tight feeling in your chest that you have from the minute you get up to the minute you go to bed. The 7th step is where we make the change in our attitude, which permits us, with humility as our guide, to move out from ourselves towards others and towards God. Right? That was one of the things, right? The whole emphasis of step 7 is on humility. It is really saying to us that now we ought to be willing to try humility in seeking the removal of our other shortcomings, just as we did when we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. If that degree of humility could enable us to find the grace by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope that the same result respecting any other problem we could possibly have. Right after that bottom line, write 7-step promises. 7-step promises. So that, and again, the degree of humility could enable us to find the grace by which such a deadly obsession could be banished, then there must be hope of the same result respecting any other problem we could possibly have. So they're telling us that the steps, that we're not, I just come here to quit drinking, but the steps are going to help us with everything in our lives. Okay, I just got a couple of quick notes. And then we're going to end from now on with the 7-step prayer. So we'll go about 5 minutes over. In step 4, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Okay, the first task was to become honest with ourselves, with another person, and with God. We should be doing step 6 and 7 right after the 5th step, right? Now, my old toolbox for living, right, was, because I had unsatisfied demands, I had to lie, cheat, steal, con, and manipulate to get it, right? So, I'm a salesman, man. If I get rid of my selfishness, how can I get what I want? Right? If I get rid of my dishonesty, how can I make a living? If I get rid of my fear, how can I face life? If I start considering others first, who's going to take care of John? Right? God will do for me what I cannot do for myself, but He will not do for me what I can do for myself. So selfishness, I've got to practice selflessness. Dishonesty, I must kick myself and try to be honest in every situation. Fear, I must practice courage and do stuff that I'm afraid to do. I must consider others above myself, right? Again, I didn't think I'd have any personality left. That's what made me me, but you know what? I get rid of my flaws and my defects. God lets the opposite flow in. So my mental habits must be broken by working against myself with God's help. This is a partnership with God. So I've got to try to be more honest, more giving, more considerate, and I pray for God's help in doing this. I've got to cast aside my old ideas and let the new ones take over. 6 and 7 are tools of change and acceptance. 2 little sentences, but perhaps the 2 biggest steps in the book. I wanted to kill myself, man, before I worked these steps because I could not accept what I had become and how I was living, man. I pray for specific things, right? You know, it's like, God, please help me be happy for that other salesman when they get that big order. I don't want to be envious. Please help me to be happy for them. God, please help me to be more patient so that I can give my time to these other people. And it's at work, because that's where that's where my defects come out. So I cannot continue to be dishonest. and expect God to remove my dishonesty. I cannot continue to be selfish and greedy and expect God to take it away. I cannot be inconsiderate of others and expect God to take that away. I must practice the opposite of what my nature has been my whole life. I become different by doing these things, right? By acting honest, by being selfless, by practicing giving, by becoming loving, and by acting humble. The old John has to die. The new John has to be reborn. 4 and 5 shows us what needs to change. 6 and 7, the change takes place. So I got to work against myself with God's help, right? I am now responsible for what I am and what I say and what I do and what I act. I can no longer blame other people. I used to be a victim, but victimhood is gone. I can change these things with God's help. Again, set 4 through 7, the greatest tools to affect change that I've ever seen. So do I live in harmony with God or disharmony? Harmony with the world or disharmony? Harmony with myself or disharmony with myself, right? We continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And when these crop up, we ask God at once to remove them. We are never cured. Progress, not perfection. That can be used as a cop-out, right? We got to be patient with patient progress, right? Oh, I'm going to cheat on my taxes. Oh, I'm going to lie about being sick. We can't do that crap, man. So, all right, I got more, but let's go to page 76. I'm going to read the first paragraph, and then we're going to hit our knees, and we're going to take step 7. Page 76 in the big book, and we're going to highlight these 2 paragraphs. If we can answer to our satisfaction, we then look at step 6, and that is, are we at peace with it? Have we done our best in our 5th step? We have emphasized willingness as being indispensable. Are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? Can He now take them all, every one? If we still cling to something we will not let go, we ask God to be willing. Right next to that, write 6-step prayer. That's a prayer. God, help me to be willing, to let this greed go. I don't want to live this way anymore. Please help me with that, God. So we're going to hit our knees and take the 7th step right now. When ready, we say something like this, and we want to memorize this one. My Creator, I am now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. We just completed step 7.